Uh, all right. Well, welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm your host, Javier Proenza. Every week, my guests and I share the answers we found to the questions we have. Join us as we explore and expand our worldview through research and ask, What's my thesis? And today, my guest is Alex Noel.
No, that's right.
Okay. And you might notice a Montrealian accent. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh no, that's not. I'm
Native?
actually, yeah, I'm not a Montreal native. I am from Newfoundland, which I don't know how
Newfoundland.
familiar you are with Canadian geography, but it's far to the east. It's a island off of the east coast in the Atlantic.
Did you say geometry?
Geography.
Oh, okay. um, so yeah, I think my sister's married to a gentleman from somewhere obscure in Canada, but to me, just I don't know. I know you live in Montreal, so that's why I assumed that that's what it was from. How's your French?
My French is very minimal, actually. I've only been here for a couple of years, so most of my French has developed in that time. But my competency in French is super low, like very basic. I'm
Yeah,
learning though.
you're learning.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a slow, move forward. I go to an Anglo university and I'm surrounded by Anglophones in my day to day, so I'm picking it up very slowly. It's not like an immersive like experience in terms of French culture.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So Anglophone, what's that word mean? I'm not familiar.
Like English speaking, English as
Okay.
your mother tongue.
Okay. So what's Newfoundland like?
Um, it's an island, so it has that in common with Montreal, I guess.
Okay, I didn't even know that. My Canadian geometry is not very good.
No, neither is mine. My geometry in general is not very good.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's where I grew up. It's where I was raised and born, and I spent most of my life there
Hmm.
until recent years. Really, I've done a couple of stints in other provinces. Like I lived briefly in northern Alberta for about 6 months. I lived briefly in Nova Scotia and Halifax, which is close in proximity to Newfoundland on the east coast.
Hmm.
Um, but for the most part, Newfoundland, born and raised, and I've lived all across the island. I did my first two university degrees there. Um, and it's my home. It's where all my family are. But it's a very unforgiving place, I would say, to live.
Okay, in terms of weather or social or both?
Yeah, in terms of all of those things, like
Okay.
Newfoundland was perceived for a long time as a have not province until the oil boom. And since the oil market crash, we've kind of gone back into this state of austerity. You see a lot of cuts over the last few years to public services. It's becoming like increasingly harder to make a go of it there.
So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm lost because the oil market crash, when was that? I'm not even that well, like, because obviously since it's not part of my economic life.
Right. Well, in recent years, like the oil stocks have crashed, have like the price per barrel has gone down significantly. That is like the mainstay of the Newfoundland and Labrador economy. And so when the oil market crashed, um, the province lost a lot of revenue. And so we've seen, the I guess, manifestations of that in terms of cuts to public services, of course, like
Hmm.
healthcare and education. And I really saw it when I was a post-secondary student there, and tuition fees were, every year it was a fight against the university administration who wanted to increase tuition fees and have successfully done so a number of years in a row now.
Hmm.
Um, and Newfoundland is like known for I guess, these sort of economic struggles as well. Sort of in the like early colonial period in Newfoundland up until the 90s, the fishery was, a like huge part of the provincial economy. Um, and then the cod stocks dropped, and there was a moratorium on the fishery, and so a lot of outport communities in Newfoundland lost, virtually all of the jobs that were available to some of those outport regions, and that's we're still experiencing the social and economic impacts of that 30 years later. So
Yeah.
it's a really hard place to live, and most people of my generation have had to leave to um, find a life somewhere else.
Mhm.
Myself being one of those people.
Who
um,
ended up in Montreal?
I ended up in Montreal, but I also did like a lot of young Newfoundlanders do. And I went to Alberta, which is, the another, oil-based economy.
Oh, okay.
It's where the Canadian oil sands are. And so a lot of like young people without post-secondary education or with some experience in the trades go there to find good paying jobs.
Uh-huh.
So there's a huge, like the Newfoundland economy is largely based in this sort of rotational work. People fly to Alberta and work for a few weeks in the camps, and then they come home for a few weeks, and so on and so forth, back and forth.
So
Um,
it's migrant labor essentially.
Essentially within
Yeah.
the borders of,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
Isn't
Canada.
that funny? When there's no borders, it's all right.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
what's it called? Hold on. I'm getting used to all this video stuff, so forgive me. Your video is just so much better than mine right now, better framed. Um, so that's fascinating. Because we don't necessarily hear stories like that, actually, even in the US, really,
Yeah.
we just think of this like Canadian fairyland where, yeah. So is neoliberal politic a thing there?
Yeah, absolutely. And,
Yeah.
I think the majority of Canadians have this like certain smugness too, like we're so better than, Americans. And and it's just like a total crock of shit. Like we
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
so many social issues here. And
Yeah.
we're on colonized land, just like the United States. And yeah, it's kind of a mirage here. I think a lot of Canadians, especially, white settler Canadians, live in a sort of fantasy world. Like life here is
Yeah.
so much better than in the United States, but it's not the case. It's just, I think, better packaged in some ways.
Well, you only send us your funniest people. They're not sending the best. They're sending their funniest, like Norm Macdonald, Tom Green, Mike Myers. Like historically, you guys are like bringing us the goods. So that's kind of how we see you guys too, And then you
Alex
have,
Trebek,
yeah,
very
Alex Trebek.
important.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know he was from there, but
Mhm.
that's crazy. Yeah, I was thinking about it a lot. Um, just the idea of how difficult it is. I was trying to understand why I watch or like listen. I found a new true crime person, which is this like, I think she's Scottish. I don't know British accents that well, but she just sits down and does like internet researched YouTube videos about true crime, and it's really like she's really diplomatic. First of all, she has like a good disclaimer, but I was just thinking about, like, I mean, I'm getting sidetracked. I was basically just thinking about why I'm still fascinated, and like seeking out other stories other than like my first introduction podcast, which was so like, and I think that part of it is just like trying to understand fucked up human brains to sort of understand what's happening on a class level where like people are, so like the idea that people are sociopaths that are CEOs, and then that's like a good idea, or like I don't know, and I feel like what you kind of brought up a point about like white people on land where it's like, yeah, it's a nice it's really difficult to sort of just take that shit on, and I realize that I just have a black heart that can like, that just kind of is obsessed with like processing that feeling and like looking at it instead of like uh cringing away, and it's done great for my career, but but yeah, like I really, it's amazing just how like someone like Ajit Pai, who do you know who that is?
No, I don't.
Ajit Pai is the guy that I think twice now has killed net neutrality, and like done it with a big grin on his face, and like for on behalf of Verizon. It's, to me, that is mind blowing. That level of like just uh like how I'm rich, bitch. And then, but then there's like this subservient level to it where you're also like, yeah, you're wealthy and you're in this class, but then like now your friends are like, well, first of all, if you're really wealthy, now you're Ellen and your friend is George W. Bush, you know. That level of class solidarity, and like even people like I don't know, man. I feel like once you enter that class, like people like AOC who are like the woke left's um answer, and I think a lot of people are still attached to this idea that they're, they like just apologize for people that are clearly co-opted at this point.
Mhm.
Like I don't know if you know about the CARES Act. Are you familiar with what happened over here?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so over here they basically just gave away everything. It was like the largest transfer of wealth upwards. And
Mhm.
now she's like been posting and pretending um like it wasn't Nancy Pelosi and them, and every single one voted for it with no contest. Like, and
Mhm.
like now she's like, oh, that was a horrible thing, and the Republicans did it. And I'm like, nah, fuck you.
Mhm. Yeah,
so
you
so
guys are in it together, you know?
yeah,
Like the Dems and the Republicans, for sure.
yeah. I mean, it must be exhausting to watch from outside too.
Yeah, it is. And, these people like AOC are also like martyrized in Canada as being like the, bastions of progressive politics. And
Ugh.
I find it also just like incredibly nauseating because these same people would not like hold up like someone like Justin Trudeau, our prime minister, who preaches like these sort of like liberal politics, and like these people will be like quite critical of our own government, but then when we look at American politics, don't have like the same level of analysis, or like the analysis just goes out through the window. I don't really understand
Yeah.
what happens there, but there's like a completely different perspective on American politics from like the Canadian like progressive quote unquote left.
Really? And you
Yeah.
guys, do you feel like you guys have a left? Because I feel like we just have two right-wing parties. Obviously, I don't think that that's like a revolutionary thought. I mean, I'm sure you agree.
Yeah, I mean
But
we've got the right and we've got the center. So it's not really, I don't think that we have like, not in terms of like the political establishment. And even like in terms of like the sort of on the ground activism that happens, sometimes I feel sort of hopeless when I see what's going on out there, or even participate in certain things, because like I feel like there's this huge kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Um, like it's sort of what's happening in terms of activism is sort of toothless in a way, because there are no real demands often. There's lots of marches and protests and public
Yeah.
exhibitions of dissent, but there's no real targeted demands. And I feel like it's just like what's happening is sometimes disorganized and not effective. And
Yeah.
I could go on at length about that. And
Oh, that's
I
fine.
I kind of fall
I
into
do.
my own like sort of like, trap of like being just poisoned by cynicism, and I try to avoid that as much as possible. And
No,
yeah.
I understand that and empathize with that. Where there was a point where I was getting so angry at people that were getting angry at Trump supporters, and then I
Mhm.
realized I was caught in the like same trap of like, but it's like to a certain degree, like it's just this like they're so hateful, and I'm like, you don't hear yourself. And then that would make me fucking furious, because especially as the election was coming up now, I mean, the reality of Biden has set in and we're all happy, right? Everything's good. And I mean, it like right now at work, here's how we are, where I'm actually angry at somebody at work for getting sick and like quarantining two of our people, and then like now we have to cover, so my holidays are like all just work, right?
Mm.
And I'm just like, but like, you know it doesn't have to be like that, right? Like if we had government assistance, we wouldn't. What did they do for you guys when the lockdown happened?
Well, it's sort of been all over the place, and each province has also rolled out their own specific plan. So it's been different, in terms of like the regional response. Um,
Mm,
I'm in Quebec, which has the most cases of COVID-19. It was the province that was initially hit hardest, the fastest, when the virus came to Canada. And it hit the long-term care homes especially bad. So I
okay.
think we have around 350,000 cases across the country in total. About a third of those are in Quebec, which does not contain a third of the population. It's like
Yeah.
a very high percentage of people in Quebec that have gotten COVID-19. And then about half of the total deaths across the country have also been in Quebec, and mostly concentrated again in those long-term care homes. So initially, the response here was quite swift. And I was like, sort of like, at first, I would say impressed by the conservative government's um, response, which I thought was rather
Mhm.
progressive and effective to like, shut things down, pull
And did you
people.
guys get financial assistance?
We also got financial assistance from the federal government. So everyone could, from I think April or March until September, everyone was able to receive $2,000 a month Canadian for assistance if they had lost work through COVID-19. But that doesn't include, I mean, that was not,
So you
uh,
you guys did unemployment
what's
route.
that?
You guys went the unemployment route. Like if you didn't have a job before, you didn't get anything.
Sort of. So there was a couple different programs.
Okay.
So like the like sort of central like CERB program, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit is what it was called. That $2,000 a month was earmarked for people who had lost work due to COVID-19, but that was like left very open and sort of vague in terms of like what that meant. But you'd had to have earned at least $5,000 either since 2020, since January 1st, 2020, or in the last 12 months.
Mhm.
So the threshold for earning was low, but it still left out a lot of people, especially students that were, graduating, or, other people that were not working or had lost income. I mean, there was so many people that were left out of that. And there were other programs introduced, like there was a program to assist specifically students. But I think the the support benefit for students was around $1,200 a month, which is just like bizarre to me, because
That's what we got once.
yeah, yeah, I know. I
This is
mean,
mind blowing to me. I think that like I don't know, man. When I hear that, all I think about is just like our people are telling us what they think of us, right? Like
mm,
it's our leadership is telling us exactly what they think of us, what they think of all of our work. You know, like people have built lives and they're getting destroyed. It's one of the fucking craziest things that I wasn't even that cynical, you know,
mm,
like that takes a lot of fucking cynicism and it shows you who they are. It's really crazy. Everybody else is just gonna be okay. And like people, like, have you seen the food lines out here?
no.
Oh, they're like miles long with cars, just like waiting to get food. And I think in Texas is the ones that I saw. But yeah, before we get sidetracked too long, um, do you have a topic?
I thought we were just going to complain, so
Oh, that's fine too. We can keep doing that. Well, you
that's
just did
my
a
method.
thesis, so I don't know if you hate it so much that you don't want to talk about it,
I
or
I really did hate it. I mean,
okay.
COVID-19 presented its own challenges for doing research, I think, and like my thesis was not did not pan out as I had like originally conceptualized it. Like I
Oh,
needed
okay.
it done. I needed to like move on with my life. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's done and I'm happy about that. Uh,
That sounds like a thesis.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it was very like much the true thesis experience in that regard, I think.
Well,
The
like
skill was there.
what are your main areas of interest in terms of like when you're researching? Like what were you, or maybe even what did you hope to like it to be? What would the ideal thesis have come out like?
Yeah, I mean,
You didn't get to like access, did it, was it interviews that you couldn't do and things like that?
well, I my thesis was done sort of like in a silo. Like I had no access to resources. Like I started writing my thesis in March when the pandemic hit and everything shut down. So basically it was like me alone in my studio or like at home, like working on my kitchen table because I didn't even have
Mhm.
a like an office, like a desk set up until a few months ago. Um, and so like in that way it was like very like insular, and it's not my preferred way to do research. Like I prefer a much more like collaborative
Yeah.
approach for research and teaching and learning and all of those things, but it wasn't really possible. And I so it was difficult for me to produce something under those constraints. But my thesis work largely looked at like the sort of pedagogical value of making things, which I think
Mm.
is relatively, not acknowledged in art education, which is my field.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, so like the type of learning that happens through making something through like artistic methods,
Mhm.
particularly material craft practices, like hands-on practices, as opposed to working with digital technologies, which is very popular right now and in the arts in general.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
so really
And
going
like expensive and resource prohibitive.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I mean, if you mention like new media technologies in a funding proposal, you're almost guaranteed some money, right? Like
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's weird in that way.
Um, so what art education for what age groups?
So I'm not my background is actually I'm an art teacher by trade, like a high
Mhm.
school art teacher. Um, but my
Still currently, presently
not at the moment, but prior to like
going to grad school.
going to grad school, prior to starting my master's work, and now I'm into my PhD in art education. But
Mm.
it's something that eventually I'll return to in some capacity. But I'm teaching online through the university right now, so I'm teaching undergraduate students um, via Zoom, which
Mm-hmm.
like I mentioned before, I have little competency in, and poses a ton of pedagogical challenges for me as somebody who is, I consider myself a very like embodied educator, if that makes sense. Like the space and my proximity to people is like a very important part of the learning environment. And
Mm-hmm.
so Zoom is like virtually upended all of that. Like I've
Yeah.
had to like learn a completely different approach and like way to do this thing, uh kind of like in the moment and as I go. Like there was no opportunity for me to like trial things beforehand. It was
Mm-hmm.
like I was thrown into it and I had to like figure it out. But honestly, the students that I've worked with, like, you know, we're all hanging on by a thread. I acknowledge that, they acknowledge that, and we've been like very kind to one another, and it's made it so much better than, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it could have been so much worse. But I think we're all on the same page. We're all, you know, students at some level of our education, and we can kind of share that in terms of it's like a shared experience that we have, and something that we can, you know, relate to each other through. So that's
Yeah.
been that's been good. But I think I just went on a huge tangent here.
No, no, that's fine. No, that's interesting. I mean, because, well, that makes me wonder, like, what I mean, I have no access to like that experience. Right now, I'm in a pretty big bubble where the only people that I interact with are people with money to buy instruments
Yeah.
and coworkers that have jobs, right?
Mhm.
And so, like, I mean, that's actually what I'm doing as soon as we're done talking. But the the idea of being a college student right now, like, it seems kind of, I don't know, like, it's anxiety provoking enough to be in school and then to have no social elements. So like all you have is the anxiety and none of the, like, atmosphere of being in school, and like thinking that you're gonna fucking become a master of the universe. Like, all of those fantasies are hard to do from your bedroom, like that dreaming of like, oh shit, especially like while the world is dying outside. It must be a very strange time to be like planning your future, because essentially that's why you're going to school, right? Like, I mean, in theory.
I mean, I think one of the important aspects of like the university environment, especially for, you know, students in the very formative part of their education, is also like developing this like sense of community and like
Mhm.
being with their peers. Like I think that's like really crucial part that is kind of more or less absent right now. I know that
Yeah.
people can still, you know, form relationships and make connections online, but it is certainly not the same as like a face-to-face interaction. And so like,
Yeah.
you know, I really feel for students that are like in their first year of university and this is how they are, you know, experiencing that. It's a bit different from me. I feel like I've been kind of, as a graduate student, we're kind of like, I felt anyway that I was sort of removed from the university community
Mhm.
already. There was sort of like this degree of separation because there's this like level of independence to the work, especially when you start writing your thesis. But for students earlier on in their education, I really feel like there's this like fundamental part that is, you know, absent right now, and it's
Yeah.
really unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, then I had a really depressing thought, as I was like, oh yeah, and it doesn't prepare you for the real world. And I was like, oh, maybe it does, because the real world is just Zoom meetings. Yeah, I didn't mean to bum us out there.
No,
Uh,
I'm always bummed out. It's all good.
Oh yeah, I know, right? Oh man. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard not to be cynical right now. It's hard not to, at least for if you're like an American like me. And dude, at first it was the election that we needed to get past before they did anything. Now they're waiting until January and they're going on vacation. It breaks my heart. It's like, if it's like a fucking rejection, like you're being rejected by the people that like shit on you for not voting on them. It's just, it feels like too much. Like, uh I don't know.
Yeah.
The and like just the whole thing with the protests and how that was a big part of everything, and now and like how quickly we went into election mode, and that was just such a heartbreak for me. Like, I just don't know how to process everything. It really is like one of those things where I'm like, well, I guess I'll just keep working, trying to save up so that I don't get fucked. you know but yeah, it's overwhelming. I uh I don't know what to say that's happy. But but yeah, I guess so. Like, what are things that you would like Americans to understand about Canada that, at least, like, or maybe French Canada, or maybe, well, you haven't been there that long, like just your Canadian experience, because I guess you can't speak for all of Canada, but like, what maybe about your politics that we don't realize, things like that, or just like something about growing up, like what the favorite candy was. I don't know. I'm keeping it broad.
I really have always assumed that, Americans don't really understand or know anything or hear anything about what goes on up north, and that seems to be relatively true.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, I think that you've got your own things to worry about, honestly.
we got our hands full.
Our-
How many
yeah,
wars do you guys have?
what's that?
How many wars are you guys in?
Oh, I'm sure we're implicated in many, by proxy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Newfoundland, sorry, Canada has, also horrendous foreign policy in a lot of regards, and
Yeah.
does horrendous things overseas, especially in terms of like resource extraction. And yeah, it's um I think we, if anything, need to be the ones taking a harder look at what's going on here.
Mhm.
Um, because like too often we fall into this trap, like I said earlier, like this like sort of there is this like incredible smugness against like the liberal population that we are doing so much better than the Americans, and
Yeah.
like thank God we're not them, and like we have it so much better. And yeah, when it's just not the reality for so many people living here, especially Black and Indigenous peoples.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I see some of that pop up on your feed. It seems like a very complicated uh thing to get into, but you were you there was a thing about, you brought up fishing, and there was a thing about that you posted about austerity and fishing. So what's going on with that? Like, was that you, or maybe?
No, that was me. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I mentioned earlier that the economy in Newfoundland was, largely sustained through the fishery for um, most of its like colonial history up until, the 90s ish,
Mhm.
when there was a moratorium placed on the cod fishery. And so that had really devastating impacts for rural communities. So there's so much to explain when it comes to like contextualizing like the
Mhm.
politics and the history of Newfoundland and Labrador. But It is an island with a huge rural population. There's a few small cities, if you can call them that. Like the capital of Newfoundland is St. John's, and it has about 75,000 people, and that is the largest like urban area by far. The town where I grew up, which I think is like the third largest town in Newfoundland, has about 20,000 23,000 people, I think, yeah, in terms of its population. So it's like very rural, and the population is very dispersed throughout the island. So there are a lot of small fishing communities that were hit very hard in the 90s through the moratorium, and are still like suffering the economic consequences to this day.
Mm-hmm.
What's really interesting, I guess, in terms of Newfoundland and Labrador as it relates to my research interests and practice, is the fixation on the sort of like cultural economies there. So in the last few years, what we've been seeing is this huge push for rural revitalization through like the arts and culture and tourism sector, which are all like lumped into this sort of the same ministry within the province. So the minister responsible for tourism is also responsible for arts and culture, and you can really see that in terms of like how public policy is implemented. So in recent years, there's been one of the major projects in recent years has been the Fogo Island Inn, which is in Fogo Island, which is a tiny, again, another island within the island in a way. And so essentially this Canadian billionaire, so-called philanthropist, who's originally from the province, set up this foundation to build the Fogo Island Inn, which was supposed to be an arts and cultural center. So it's a hotel, essentially. It's a luxury hotel with a gallery. And
it's not is it like bringing artists from it's like it's not representative local culture, kind of, it sounds like?
Well, they sell local craft work in the inn. So you can buy like a handmade quilt for $2,000.
Okay.
And you can, and they have artist residencies attached to the inn. It was a really major project that promised a lot to the community, because this was one of these fishing communities that had never recovered from the moratorium. So the idea was, oh, it's going to bring jobs, it's going to bolster arts and culture in Newfoundland and Labrador, and it's going to like put us on the like it's going to bring us into the international art circuit. And so these were all the promises, and of course like that did not pan out. It's a luxury hotel where you pay $1,500 a night to stay in a room. A lot of the labor is there's managers brought in from Toronto and other big cities, and like the good jobs that are associated with the inn did not go to locals from the community. Like there are some locals working in the hotel, but it's in the laundry facilities or dishwashing in the super fancy hotel restaurant.
That's interesting, because it sounds like they basically just or like, yeah, we're going to import some class into this place, right? Like literally, like, and it's kind of that is sort of how that world like sort of thinks of their altruism, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's interesting to like wonder how much of it is just like blindness and how much of it is just evil. And if it really matters, obviously it doesn't. But like, just to sort of, I don't know, getting back into that, like like getting back into the thing of like why I'm interested in true crime. It's sort of like those people, we like to not think of them as human, but that is a human, right? Like that is whatever's happened to them. That's within the capacity of like a born creature, whether there's like head trauma that, you know, like obviously things happen, but like that is a version of human that becomes a fucking mass murderer,
Mhm.
right? Like that's within human capacity to become that. Not everybody, like not everybody's going to grow up to be like that, but that's like a defective human that comes out. I mean, that's pretty horrible way of saying that, but we're talking about serial killers. But I think that like when you're dealing with class blindness, I think that like there is a learned sociopathy that you kind of have to, you know, like if everybody that was doing really well right now took the time to take on the actual politics other than the like corporate politics that's provided for them so that they can feel like, you know, they're for gay people even though they're for war, and gay people probably die from war. You know. And like they're like, I don't know, I'm thinking a lot about this thing about how when you let your government dehumanize other people, like you're really fucking yourself, because then then you start to allow them to like be like, well, obviously there's different kinds of human, right? And there's like better humans, and then there's the ones that we kill. And then now I feel like right now what we got is a lot of people are just like, and then there's the ones that it's okay if they starve to death and die of COVID, you know. Like it's really interesting how all of our progressives went along with that. You know,
Mhm.
that really is like, you know, so I think that that also ties into like my interest with cults, right? Because there's a belief mechanism. There has to be, even if it like, you know, the rationalization, like, you know, like I don't know. I guess the idea of trying to empathize without like validating their point of view, but just sort of under trying to understand like what the fuck, like, you know, like where are you coming from, you know. And it's one of those things that I'm still working on. But for me, I think that it's on that level. Like to look at the horrors, you have to have some sort of like a morbid streak in you that makes you like be able to look into this abyss and be like, I'm gonna be okay. You know. So I don't know. It's pretty scary out here. I'm pretty sure we're gonna lock down again soon sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's starting to we're facing the, you know, this so-called second wave here now, and things are locking down again. Up until I think today, there were certain like regions that did not even have like a mandatory mask rule implemented or anything
Yeah.
like that for indoor spaces. And so yeah, it is really scary. It's especially, I feel like so, you know, like kind of, you know, guilty about even complaining because I'm so secure. It's kind of funny because being an academic is such a precarious lifestyle, and I've like never had money, and I've always been financially strapped and like worrying about like where things are, like how I'm going to move things around and like make ends meet and everything. And then on one hand there's that, but on the other hand, like it's also like being in this like world has protected me at this particular time because I've gotten to
Yeah.
stay home and I've gotten to work from home and I teach from home. And um, I'm very lucky in that regard.
Yeah.
Because in any other circumstance, like I would be working, you know, at a grocery store or yeah, it's dare I say it, like a unprecedented time. And
Yeah.
uh, it's yeah, it leaves me speechless. Like I still, every day when I wake up, I'm in disbelief that this is even happening.
Yeah. Yeah. It is it's a crazy thing to like wake up and have a completely different reality. Because it's like years of conditioning too, right? Like, and expectations and stuff like that. And it's sort of like a complete restructuring of society in this weird way where, I mean, I can't imagine, like, for example, someone that's not doing well are restaurant owners, people that have put their whole lives into like a work ethic that is like, it's like the American dream, it's capitalist. Over here just getting abandoned, it's so fucking heavy. I can't even like, I can't start to like process the empathy for everybody at the same time, because if I open those floodgates, like, I'm gonna fucking weep.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's just such a, people have been talking about the precariat for a very long time, and it was always this concept of like, oh, like maybe an industry will go, and then those people are fucked, or uh things become automated and algorithms and shit like that, and slowly we get squeezed out. And then no, it's just like, we're going to lock shit down, we're not going to give anybody money, all their businesses are going to crash, and we're going to just come in and sweep up. We're going to, give all the money, the bailout money, to the rich so that they can fucking spend it. And now it's like, every business is going to end up coming out of this as a monopoly.
Mhm.
It's really fun times, guys.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
things that were always happening anyway, but like pushed to the extreme,
yeah,
so it's like
yeah.
it,
Hopefully Etsy shops are going to become like really popular. People like trying to get something not homogenous and like corporate,
yeah, here's my macaroni craft, please buy it. I'm
of some intellectual property of like, Yoda, baby Yoda.
yeah. That's the new economy, the
Oh,
new
jeez.
economy.
It is, man. Silicon Valley is such a scary worldview. That's the other thing though that's interesting, like, because it's one thing if you're a high school teacher, but now you're teaching college, so that's a little bit of a different like cultural cachet, I guess, because like, um since it's higher education, I feel like maybe, like, there is, even though you guys don't get paid shit either, there's still an expectation that you get paid more. But the other thing is just that, like, um I don't know, I feel like, and maybe I'm just like trying to make something out of nothing, but I feel like there's like a veneration for academia as well from like the upper class, whereas like they hate high schools and they hate like public schools and shit like that, where um it it's just an interesting thing that, like, ultimately, whether you're in high school or you're a professor, you still need to fucking have your kids trained by somebody. And now everybody's freaking out that the schools are shut. you know, someone needs to take care of my kids. All they're doing is jerking off all day.
Yeah, it is the most thankless kind of work. And there's a huge attrition rate for new teachers as well. Like I think like
What's attrition?
like a huge number of teachers leave the field within their
Okay.
first 5 years of working because they just face major burnout. Um, and I can totally see how that happens. It's,
I know a
especially
lot of
now.
ex-teachers.
Yeah, I know a lot of very bitter teachers. Maybe myself being one of them. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really thankless and challenging work and
Yeah.
at the university level, I always thought I would prefer to teach at a higher level, but like a, quote unquote higher level. Um, but I don't know, it not necessarily so. I'm growing to like appreciate teaching and learning with like younger students or younger learners.
Mm,
It's it's just like a less of a, it feels less like a transaction. Like I do feel like in the university, you know, a lot of students are so, rightfully so, like bitter and cynical about, you know, the circumstances of being in university, of being treated like a customer and paying like massive fees for a service that they don't feel always like, you know, provides in the way that it should. And as somebody working within that system as well, I feel like I do at sometimes get the brunt of that, even though it's, you know, I'm just another friggin' cog in this machine. Like I have no power here. Like I'm underpaid. Like I'm like beholden to the university administration and the faculty and all of
yeah.
these sorts of power structures. And I try to be like honest and real about that. And
Mm,
I think that that helps, but there are definitely certain expectations like within teaching within a university context that you don't have to deal with like in public school, for
yeah.
example. So and I've come to like appreciate that a little bit more after having this experience.
Yeah. So you think you're not gonna get your what's it called, tenure position? You're not going for that?
I'm not banking on it. I think I would it would probably, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not gonna bank on that for sure. But I've always been more interested in, I'm just kind of selfish in this way, I guess, like doing my own projects and my own research. Like
Yeah.
I'm at the university to like pursue my own research and projects, and teaching and all of those things that come along with it are sort of like secondary to that, to be honest. Like
Mhm.
ideally I would just like to be doing my own stuff all of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not even when it comes to art, I'm really not interested too much in what's happening, you know, in the art milieu, so to speak. um I'm just like interested in what I'm doing.
So let's play a hypothetical game that's fun and really not fair.
Okay.
Okay. Let's say how you or I'm going off of how Epstein used to like have scientists all around him trying to get funding. How evil a person would you be willing to take funding from so that you never had to do anything other than research and put out papers?
Oh wow. I mean, it really,
Mass murderer, like
are
it,
there,
war criminal, president.
yeah, I mean, isn't all of the money that's circulating connected to that stuff in some capacity? Funny side story though, there was just like
I did get proposition once.
well, I'm sure you're familiar with like Elon Musk and
Uh-huh.
his romantic partner Grimes,
Grimes.
who is a Canadian musician. She's from British Columbia, but she like has ties to Montreal as well. Well, she just got a grant from a Canadian granting agency for musicians
Hmm.
for almost $100,000, which is
That's
just
great.
obscene. Like she's living in LA with Elon Musk, who is the
Who
second
just
richest.
passed who just passed Bill Gates.
Yeah, he's the second richest man in the world
Yeah.
or something, or in
Yeah,
the
yeah. It's Bezos, him, and yeah.
yeah. And so she gets this money, and meanwhile, like most artists and musicians that I know, like who work in the service industry, have lost like their income, are not even able to pursue like
Yeah.
their art and their practice right now, are you know, like in such a grave situation, and meanwhile this funding agency doles out like 100K to Grimes. It's just wild, like how all of this stuff works. And
Yeah.
it's why I have such a fraught relationship, honestly, with like art, um
Yeah.
the art
That's why
world.
I do the show, because I hate
Yeah,
it.
that's it. I hate it. I find it so, like, on one hand, like, by the, like, I think general public, I would say that like art doesn't get the credit that it deserves, but then within the like art world, art gets way too much credit.
Yeah.
And it, like, I have like such a issue with this sort of like nobility associated with like art as a profession, being an artist, as well as if it's like inherently
Yeah.
useful or progressive or whatever.
I think one of the things that I have a problem with is the relationship between like the purist and the market. Like, there's a lot of people that react to that world, the broader shitty art world, and then the reaction to it is like, oh, I'm an artist, I don't do branding, and stupid things like that, where it's like, you're still playing the game, dude. Like, you're calling it by different, it doesn't make it, it's like a way of elevating yourself, even though you can't, like, that, I don't find that self-empowering.
No.
Like, I think that that's just kind of self-defeatist in this really strange way. But yeah, I don't know. I do. One of the things that is, going back to that sociopath thing, my theory about sociopathy, is that dude, like, Elon Musk is also the, like, trolling people when they say that he was like, that we cooed Bolivia for their
Yeah.
fucking lithium. And
Yeah.
like, I don't know, man. That just seems like, there's, there's just no angle that you can present that to me where I'm like, I get it. Like,
Hmm.
that's like Trumpian, you know? And that goes to sort of the thing of like, I don't think that I think there's a lot of people that are now going to swing their dick real big. Like, what's his name? The fucking Biden and all of that. Like, if you look at his cabinet selection and all that shit,
Hmm.
it's just, we are going to hurt people.
Yeah.
And like, the thing that blows my mind is that perspective of like, we got to protect Americans. When like, in reality, they're just, I don't know, man. The idea that they could do things to people and then turn around and do them to us, the fact that that doesn't register to people is like terrifying to me. And I think that that's how a lot of evil gets done. I think that, like, I don't know. I think that there's just this like willingness to be blind to it that is terrifying. That, like, and it's coming for us all, at least in the US. That hunger, man. When your fucking belly is empty, it's been a while for me, but I've spent some days where I was like, oh my god, I can't fucking eat food for like the next 2 days, or I don't have any money to eat food for like a day or two. And like, this is not a day or two. These are people that have educations. This is all that meritocracy myth is like fucking dying real hard. And like, people that worked hard for their businesses and earn their businesses are fucked. People that worked hard for their educations, and now, like, several different industries don't exist anymore. It's a wild time to I can't imagine what it's like to be a fucking student, and like, to be a teacher, and just sort of also be like, I don't fucking know. This is new, guys. I have no frame of reference for this.
Yeah. Well, it's like easy to just admit that. Like, I find I get a lot of lenience from students because I'm so upfront about that. Like I don't present myself as
Yeah.
like an expert or an authority or anything like that. So I think that like that helps me get by. um, yeah,
Well, I think we can probably end on there. It was really nice talking to you, Alex. Noel.
you got
Okay.
it. Mhm. Not Noel, and being in Quebec, like people often assume that it's Noel, but
Yeah. One of my least favorite pronunciations of my name is the French one, which is Javier or Javier. But
oh yeah.
like, I don't mind it in French, but like when Americans say it, it's Javier. And I'm like, nails on the
God.
chalkboard.
I feel like that's what I sound like every time I speak French, which
Really?
really makes it difficult for me to practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have anything that you need to promote?
No,
Just your
no,
Instagram?
definitely not.
Are you
What's
are you one just your Instagram?
No, I don't promote. I'm social media is like sort of a private domain for me. I'm like
Oh, okay.
not in
Okay.
the business of this sort of like social media promotion. Actually, I'm very
You made me feel like such a whore right now.
I do.
Well, I'm Javier at or I'm at Javier Proenza. Anyway, it was really nice talking to you. I'm sure I'll talk to you again at some point down the line because I definitely am committed to getting my 1,000 followers on YouTube so that I can start making advertisement for money from Google. It's my way of selling out without actually having to read ads. You should follow my thing so that I can get up to 8, but I
Yeah,
won't be mad at you
I'll
if you
do
don't
my
subscribe.
part. I'll do my
You
part.
do your part. All right.
Yeah.
We're going to get there. And
Yeah.
eventually, when I start making all that sweet ad money, I'm going to pay my guests.
Maybe you can have me on again once I finish my PhD dissertation and have
Yeah.
something to actually speak about
Well, you
related.
should wait until you should do that in between pandemics.
Yeah, okay. I'll see you in the next pandemic.
No, I'm saying you should write it in between pandemics so you can go to libraries.
I see, I see. Yeah, good strategy.
Yeah. I love that we're definitely assuming another economic crash in 10 years. That's
Yeah,
like the new
that's a
normal.
given now. Like, how
Yeah.
many have we seen? In my lifetime, I've seen several. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not that old. So,
All right. It was a pleasure. And I will talk to you soon, definitely on Instagram. Don't follow at all. And yeah, in any capacity. Oh, and what are your pronouns just to be sure?
they and them, I
They
use.
and them. Okay. Just because if I refer to Alex Noel ever, so that I have them ready.
Yeah, have those in
Okay.
your back pocket.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. All right. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Cool,
Bye.
you too, man. Bye.